Hello and welcome to the 6 Essentials of Empowered Learner Experiences presented by SAP Litmos. With us today, we have 2 presenters, Samantha Lang and Dr. Lauren Park. Lauren is a research scientist on SAP SuccessFactors HR research team, where she conducts applied mixed method research on workforce psychology topics. She currently leads the SAP Learning Research Program, engaging learning leaders across industries and regions on learning-related topics to support SAP's learning strategy. Samantha is Marketing Content Director. She has contributed to B2B software marketing teams for nearly 20 years, specializing in messaging, content creation, branding, and creative strategy. She entered the e-learning industry in 2015 upon joining the Litmos team, and now brings her marketing experience to the SAP Learning Technology group. So let's please welcome Samantha and Lauren to the session. If you all would like to start sharing your screen, the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and get us started with sharing.
Okay, looks good.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sharing, Lauren. So welcome again. We'll before we get started, just a big thanks to, I'm Samantha, by the way, with the SAP Litmos marketing team. And before we get started, my colleague Lauren and I are thrilled to be here, and we would like to thank eLearning Industry for hosting us today. And thanks, Melissa, for all the lovely intros and housekeeping stuff that we don't have to cover. So I think since we've already done our bios briefly, we can go to the agenda. And I would like to say we want to keep things, I know the e-learning industry audience is always really interactive anyway, but we do want to keep things, I can already see there's tons of chats from everybody saying hi. We want to keep it interactive. So if you want to type your questions, as Melissa was saying, into the Q&A and into the chat, we will, I think Melissa's going to be answering some questions on the kind of behind the scenes, but Lauren and I will be answering the more content related questions. We're going to wait to the end to answer those. I know some presenters like to answer as they go. I get overwhelmed when that happens. So we'll wait. We're going to wait and we'll take questions at the end. So, but send them along while we're going. So very simple agenda. We've kept things really, pretty plain to see here. We're going to talk about the future of learning and what learners want as sort of the initial context to what we're going to be talking about. And we'll ask you all to participate in a couple of polls on those 2 subjects that we've prepared, just to hear what you all out there are experiencing in the areas of the future of learning and what learners want. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the new world of learner experience and sort of the status quo and where we are now and how learner experience maybe has changed recently. And then the bulk of our talk today is the title of today's webinar, the 6 Essentials of Empowered Learner Experience. And this is based on research that my colleague, Dr. Park, has done, our in-house researcher here at SAP Learning. And we're going to go through each of those individually, each of the 6 pieces. And then we're going to just open it up for conversation and Q&A. So really simple. I say we jump right in, Lauren.
Sounds great.
Okay, so we don't want to blow your minds by starting in the future. Ooh, we're starting in the future. But sometimes I think it's really good to, if we are going to talk about the status quo, it can be valuable to discuss what's on the horizon as well, and what's coming and where we all see L&D, HR, whatever training discipline you're in, where we think we're headed collectively. And with that, I'll let Lauren kind of talk about this question in the blue on the slide there and how we asked it, who we asked it to, and then the results that are there in the bullets on the slide. So Lauren, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was part of our larger SAP Learning Research Program that we mentioned a bit earlier. As part of this, this was particularly 6 sessions on the idea of who learners are in organizations and learner experiences. We had 52 learning leaders from 36 organizations across the globe, and we asked each of them this question: what one word or phrase describes the future of organizational learning? And so these were really the top 4 responses. We found first, learning at the point of need, or learning in the flow of work, making sure that we are capturing learners' needs as soon as they arise and delivering learning in that context. Skills-focused learning, so learning that really focuses on individual skills and competencies to make sure that we're fostering the skills of the future and what organizations will need 5-10 years from now. Self-paced and personalized, so really taking the idea of learning and the learner experience and putting it in the learner's context, making sure that this is as relevant to them as possible. And then finally, digital. I think we see with the COVID-19 pandemic and moving everything online, learning was already kind of making that transition, but that really has been accelerated. And the learning leaders that we spoke with, their digitization of learning and training was really a top priority for their 2021 learning strategy. So with that, we would like to ask you all the same question as our learning leaders and see what do you believe is the future of organizational learning? From those 4 responses, which is most relevant to you and your organization? And of course, if you think of something else that seems more relevant to you, please share it in the chat. We would love to see.
Yeah, we'll just give this a minute here while we see our answers come in. Nice, thank you for those of you who are chatting, thank you.
Let's see, all of the above, social learning.
Oh, that's going to be a good one to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. The value of the learning and kind of that outcome. Yeah, Steve will definitely discuss that. Convenience and quick and short sessions, for sure. Yeah,
we're going to talk about that. Actually, Patrick, we're going to kind of talk about that, about convenient, quick and short sessions. Yes. Interesting. Okay, so I think that's probably good. Mel has laughing at some of the chat. I think we can probably close that one and see what kind of results we got there. Oh, interesting.
Okay, cool.
Personalized.
Lots of personalization.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's really interesting. Because this is exactly what we're hearing and what, okay. Great.
Yeah, so I guess with those results and with the future of organizational learning, we do also want to take the learner's perspective into account, right? And so we have research also on what learners want. So Sam, I'll let you kick this one off.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just taking notes from that last poll because it was exactly what we want to be talking about. This is great. We have a perfect audience, the perfect audience. So yeah, so what learners want, it's exactly what some people were just chatting as far as the personalization of the learning experience. And we definitely know, and I'm going to talk more about this when we talk about learner experience, but we definitely know that today's learners don't want to be pushed into training for the sake of training, which is not to say that, of course, everybody's still going to have to do the mandatory compliance stuff and your own proprietary mandatory stuff for your company, and that's not going to go away. Although I will say we at Litmos even have some customers that are making compliance training fun. They're like gamifying compliance training. And I had some people on a recent webinar that I was talking on where there was someone in the chat saying, I love compliance training. There are people who love it, but you know, a lot of people don't. A lot of people, you know, you hear the stories of, you know, oh, I make my spouse take that for me because I won't even do it. Yeah, there's people like, oh, I make my spouse do it. But so what people want is, what we're hearing from our customers is that they need to get something from it. It needs to be beneficial in a personalized, targeted way, and really often in a specific way, where the person enters the training knowing that by doing this, and I saw someone wrote in the chat when we were talking about the future of learning, you know, the value of a degree or a certification. It's exactly that kind of thing where it's, I need to know that by doing this training, I can get promoted to the next level in the organization. I can go to a next salary level. I can, if they're doing like a leadership or a management type course, you know, to advance your career. We're also seeing, and we're going to talk more about this, a lot of developing on the personal side, whether that means soft skills or whether that means, you know, I guess communication and that type of stuff falls into that category. We're not a huge fan at Litmos of the term soft skills because we tend to think it kind of belittles the value of those a little bit. We still use it because it's a colloquialism, but maybe not the best term, because those skills are extremely valuable. If you've seen recent, yeah, thank you, I see that in the chat here. There was a recent LinkedIn study that actually said the communication and creativity and you know, ability to problem solve were actually the most valued skills. So that's why we kind of steer away from the term soft skills a little bit. And then even things like, you know, DE&I is diversity, equity, and inclusion is a huge deal right now. And it's what learners want, that people want to feel included and they want to feel accepted. And it is a big deal. One of the analyst firms that we work with, that you guys would all know, I guess I shouldn't name them, but one of the analyst firms just did a recent survey, and DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, was actually the #1 training initiative at top performing companies. So that's a big deal. So, you know, there's just this shift over to having it be beneficial, having it be inclusive, having it be valuable in a very specific way. That was a long-winded answer, Lauren, to what learners want, but that's really what we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo that from the research. So what I have on this slide here is similar to kind of what I presented last. Is, you know, we asked the learning leaders in our research group, I believe it was about 39 leaders from about 30 customer organizations. We asked them, you know, we talk a lot about learner experience. What do you want to see the learner experience look like in the future? If you could, I think we phrased it, if you could wave a magic wand, or if you could make a wish and have it, you know, met today, what do you think would improve your learner's experience in your organization? And so we saw these 3 top things. The first being really curated learning journeys. I think in a lot of cases, learning leaders were saying, you know, people are interested in learning, but they don't know what the outcome will be, right? They don't know what they need to be doing to reach those goals of learning, to reach the next level in the organization. And so if we could put a structure in that really creates a learning journey of content and experiences, that would improve the learner experience, because they'd have a much better idea of how learning will impact them down the line and what kinds of skills they're going to build through a series of learning experiences. The second was really personalization. So of course, you know, that about half of our attendees here today said that this was the future of organizational learning. And we know that this improves the learner experience, right? We hear this, you know, from our learning leaders, we hear it anecdotally, really making sure that this experience and those results are super personalized to the individual, that the learning that I'm doing, I understand how it applies to my job specifically. And it's not just like some kind of amorphous skill that I'm learning, but I don't really understand what to do with. And then finally, really intuitive learning technology, making sure that the technology that we're offering when it comes to learning and content and experiences is really intuitive, really user-friendly, really human-centric, to make sure that my experience with technology is not eroding the effectiveness of my learning. So with all of that, we'd love to again get your thoughts on, what do your learners want? And of course, out of those three things that I mentioned, or something else entirely, we'd love to hear. But we'll put up a poll in just a moment. What improvements to your learner experience would you like to see in the future out of these three, or something completely different? And I'll pop up in the chat to watch responses.
Can you expand on that, Sandy, as far as just maybe in the chat what you mean by that? Also need a learning, I'm not sure that everyone, well, I guess everyone can see that too. It's everyone also need a learning hub, not an LMS page. Would you be willing to offer a little clarification on that?
A hub, so it's easy to get to and navigate through. More user
Okay.
than LMS.
Okay.
Maybe like an LXP. Is that what we're thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely biased because Litmos is a very, very intuitive LMS. But yeah, okay, LXP. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and so we can do that in Litmos, just for the record, that we can do probably more of what you would think of as some LXP functionality. But interesting. Okay, really interesting. All right. Yep. AI
for recommending learning. Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll read this aloud so that, because I know we're recording. So AI for recommending learning. Yes. Let's see. I'm going to go back and read that one aloud. AI for recommending learning, learning for my current future role. People that took this course also took this course. Yeah, more like Amazon style recommendations. Yeah, totally easy to create. Yeah, really, really interesting. Okay. There we go again.
That personalization.
Personalization.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely tied into the AI and the machine learning, right? We can't really create those personalized experience without that intelligent technology underneath.
Yes, interesting. 26% on the intuitive. Well, this is great because we're going to talk about all of these things. Intuitive tech is big. Okay, well, I think we can close that one. I think. Great, thank you guys so much for all the feedback there. That just gives us more fodder to talk about. I mean, it's just right on track with what we want to be talking about and what the purpose of today's session is for. So it is a new world, and even just the feedback that we were just getting right there, that learner experience has really changed. I mean, if you want to talk about in the last 10 years, but can you even imagine like the last 20 years? And I'll mention something about that. So first of all, two great quotations here from two, you guys probably know who David Kolb was, but we all know who Einstein was. And I just love this quote, that learning is experience. Everything else is just information. And the shift in that experience is that the experience now is expected to be somewhat transformative. And I will even tell you, if you go to litmos.com right now, our new tagline is literally training for transformation. And what we mean by that is that, well, we at Litmos are certainly not the first people to talk about transformative training. That term was actually started in 1999 by a guy named Peter Drucker. I'm pretty sure I have it in my notes. It was Peter Drucker. He's an author and educator, And he initially kind of coined that term of transformative training or transformational training. And the idea behind it was that it was a move from skills focused to knowledge focused training. But interestingly, as some of you may have noted, in the future of learning poll that we just launched, one of the things that people said is they actually wanted more skills focused training. So that's kind of a surprising bit of feedback right now, because a lot of organizations are moving more toward a knowledge driven training, a broader a broader ability to function and perform in your role and have balance. And that's looking at the second bullet here, the focus on the whole self model is something Lauren and I are part of a larger team at SAP that's kind of the SAP Learning Technologies. And one of the groups is the Success Factors solution, which many of you are familiar with. And they've coined the term HXM, which was formerly what most of us would have considered HCM, which was human capital management. And we've now really tried to create a new space called HXM, and that's human experience management. And what that means is, and so learner experience would be like a subcategory to employee experience on the umbrella level. Underneath that, learner experience is a piece of employee experience. And I've got just some notes here that I'm going to have to look at, but some of the things that we talk about with HXM is this whole self model. And so it's not just about you go in, you do your job, it's skills focused, you're only trained on your specific little job that you do or your big job that you do, but that's it, and that's all you do, and it's rigid, and you stay within those lines. Now we're talking about positive outcomes, about increasing job satisfaction, organizational identification and commitment, well-being, personal well-being, mental health, physical health, and then as they relate to job performance. So it's just a much broader definition of what we maybe in the past thought what learner experience was, that now it's like the whole self really needs to be considered. We can go to the next one.
Yeah, I was couldn't find my unmute button. Perfect.
So now we're gonna, so that's a lot of context, talking about our research and talking about the broader ideas and some of the more philosophical things that are happening right now. But I know what you guys all registered for today and to come is to hear about this specific research that we've done and to talk about the 6 essentials. And we are gonna, Lauren's gonna probably take a lot of these because it's her research, but we're gonna go through each one of these one by one and just talk about how these individual components add up to creating those empowered learner experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll see in this graphic on the screen, we start with number 1, motivation to learn. And so we'll dive into that a little bit. This is close to my heart as a research psychologist by training. We love motivation. And when we think about motivation to learn, and when we think about the different types of learning that happen in organizations, really it takes one of 3 forms. So the first is have to learning. I have to learn to fulfill requirements, whether those are from my job, my company, my industry. This is really, our compliance-based learning, the things that I need to check a box to be able to come into work and perform my job. So this is learning that I really have to do. The second, we have need to learning, and this is when employees really need to learn to be able to do their jobs, to be able to perform competently in their current role or to execute a task. So things like onboarding would be considered need to learning, because I need to be onboarded. I need to know about my role in my company in order to work and in order to work effectively. We also kind of think about need to learning as learning in the flow of work. So learning at the point of need where I need to execute my current task, but I'm stuck on something. I need some sort of learning or information to be able to continue on and to be able to finish that task and complete what I'm working on. And then finally, want to learning. So this is learning that really happens because employees want to grow in their current role, they want to develop towards a new role, or they just want to fulfill their curiosity on a topic. So this is that type of learning where learners don't necessarily have to do this, they don't need to do this, but they do it because it interests them and because they know that they will get great outcomes. They will learn something new that will help them grow, help them develop, or become just more educated and knowledgeable people. So with our motivation, we then access the system once we're thoroughly motivated to do so. And Sam, I'll pass it over to you to kind of talk about what this looks like from the technology side.
Yeah, so, it was really interesting in the polls there, to hear that, 26% of you were saying that it has to be intuitive technology. There was a bit of chat going on about AI. Yes. But the access, and because we're going to talk about more after you've accessed the system in a minute, but the access, we're huge on mobile. It has to be accessible on any device, 24/7, even offline. We have offline capabilities where you don't even need to have an internet connection. You can get access to your training. And then equally available to all audiences. So if you do have a really powerful LMS, you can customize your access to your different audience types. So employees are going to log in and see a totally different UI than what maybe you make available to your partners, or if you're doing customer training. You should be able to totally customize those UIs from user interfaces, from a look and feel standpoint, from a branding standpoint, messaging, etc. Even down to customizing and personalizing. Get back to our hot topic of the day here: personalizing dashboards, enabling people to personalize their own dashboards, all that kind of stuff. The access has to be just right there and super easy and fast. And that was another thing that someone wrote in the chat, is it just needs to be convenient. And then even as far as on the third bullet here, accessible across languages and regions and different levels of comfort with technology in general, being available to people with technologies. I think it's is it 508 compliance that you have to make things accessible to people who have various disabilities, and that's just all needs to be there. That's all kind of just not a want to have at this point. It's really a need to have from the technology standpoint.
Absolutely. And when we talked about this in the research, I kind of always come back to this really interesting quote from a learning leader I was talking with. They said that real learning only occurs in a little bit of crisis. So I learned most effectively, I'm going to remember what I learned when it's like a crisis that led me to learn something, right? And so if we aren't providing that access, if we aren't making it super easy for learners to get from point A to point B, that really erodes the learner experience, especially in these times of needing to find an answer, needing to learn something during these crises that he was talking about. He said even little hitches in finding learning in the moment of need make the learning experience really difficult. Even if you eventually find what you need, that the length of time that you need to spend, the clicks that you need to make from entering the system to finding that answer really makes the experience more negative. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, Lauren, this kind of leads us, our point 2 and point 3 are sort of interrelated, or essential 3, which is, access is sort of the first level. If it just doesn't work, or you can't pull it up on your mobile, or you can't pull it up on your, whatever, your tablet, that's you're done before the game even started. But then once, if the access is there and you've kind of climbed that hill, then the second piece is that once someone is in the system, that it better be easy to get around. It better be easy to navigate and find what you're looking for. And one thing that we talk about, we all live in a search engine culture. It's just search engine culture. If you can't find the answer that you're looking for right now, you're going to go right to this, right? And you're just going to look it up yourself. Now, the problem that companies are having with people doing that, if you do have a difficult to navigate LMS or LXP or whatever your learning technology is that you lose governance of data and of information. So if people are out there just like Googling answers to things about having to do their job, that you put yourself in a pretty dicey situation, because they might not even be getting correct information. They might be going to some message board and not even, doing things the way if you're the L&D professional, or if you're head of sales, or if you're head of customer service, but you're responsible for training, the people might not even be getting the information that you want them to be getting. So you've lost governance and you've lost control if they're out there just searching for answers because the learning technology is too difficult to navigate. So people really expect this user friendliness. And we now, as business people, we pretty much expect our business systems to be as good as our B2C systems, our consumer systems. It's like, yeah, make my LMS, I want it to be like somebody was saying, the Amazon or the AI recommendations. I want my LMS to function like my Spotify account or like my Netflix account. Make recommendations to me. And make it that easy, and have that B2C type experience, even though it's typically a B2B experience. Modern design, layout, and then again, the ability to personalize your own views and personalize your dashboards and just make it easy and fun and comfortable. And we pride ourselves on providing that type of solution.
Absolutely. And, one thing that I've really loved about working with Litmos is these excellent content libraries. I know we'll talk a lot more about content later on, but when you think about this combination of off-the-shelf content libraries from all of these different sources and maybe in-house content that you're creating, this navigation becomes super important because there's so much for learners to find. There's so much, there's a wealth of knowledge out there on our learning systems for learners to engage with. But if we're in this moment of need, they need to know and they need to be guided through great navigation to what they need in that moment. And this becomes even more complex when we think about, our LXPs or our learning hubs, as someone put it in the chat, where, we're combining not only maybe our learning content, but maybe learning experiences and part-time gigs or internal roles that are available to me. And so when we are putting all of these things on a landing page and we're not providing great navigation, that becomes super confusing for learners. And it lengthens the amount of time between needing to learn and finding that learning that you want to engage with. Perfect.
Yeah, so here's our hot topic. It was just so interesting to see that everybody is on the personalization bandwagon, because it's really important. Now again, people don't want to feel pushed into training unless they can really see that outcome. Sort of, it's like start at the end, start at when you're the L&D person, when you present a training, or even, the email or the text that you send out to say you need to do this training, to articulate from the outset, here's why, and I know that can be, I'm reading the chat too, that can be, difficult sometimes, but as I was saying before, people really want to see the benefits in very specific ways. Our head of training, the person that runs our internal training for Litmos and runs a very robust customer training program, he always tells us, he's like, I try to explain in even if it's just the front page of the course or the front page of the first module, to say, here's exactly why you're doing this. These are the exact benefits that you're going to get from it. And we already talked about some of the things on the slides here. It can be skills, and a lot of the chat, some of you folks were talking about how, yeah, you're still doing tons of specific skills training. That's great. That's fantastic to hear. It certainly hasn't died off, but whether it is skills, specifically, or whether it's career or leadership development, whatever it is. I love the idea of reskilling toward a different role. We saw so much of that. I'm sure many of you experienced it during the real, especially the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. I mean, there were huge organizations that were having to entirely reskill large numbers of people and having to do it very, very quickly. And part of that reskilling was even just teaching people how to work from home who had never worked from home before. It was teaching managers, how do you manage remotely? If you've never managed remotely, you're used to being in the same room with your people. You're learning an entirely new skill set. I'm sure a lot of you had to do this. So that whole idea of saying, this is why this training is here. This is why you're being reskilled. This is going to be the outcome. Your job that you're being trained for now might not look anything like the job you were doing before. That happened to countless numbers of people. And then again, this can be extended to the extended enterprise. So to not leave partners and customers out of that communication, to communicate to partners, well, you're going to be able to sell this product if you complete this certification. To customers, you're going to get this much more value out of our products or services if you complete this training. So just articulating it from the beginning, I think is really key to some of that personalization.
Absolutely. And I mean, even if that goal is just to remain compliant, right? Even if that goal is just to get my manager off my back because I keep forgetting to take this training, right? It's if we know as learners what this ultimate result is, and we know what that looks like in the context of our day-to-day, we're so much more driven to learn and engage, and maybe even come back in the future, which we'll talk about in a moment. Perfect. So this next piece is engaging learning content. So we heard from, our leaders that there are lots of different types of learners in organizations, right? We have, existing research on all of these different learner personas that are common across different types of organizations. But even if you fall into these different roles and you're at a different level in the organization, learners really have a few content needs in common, right? So this really needs to be engaging and incorporate interaction. We need to make sure that we are capturing the learner's interest from the beginning and maintaining it throughout the learner experience. We need to make sure that this content is factual, kind of as Sam mentioned. If I'm going off to Google and I'm finding a wrong answer, an answer that might have been right in 2007, that's not going to help me as a learner. And so the content that I need to be consuming needs to be really up to date, and it needs to be correct. And then finally, content needs to be delivered in the way that the learner learns best. Whether this is different, delivery methods, or this is different sizes, we really need to be making sure that we're accounting for all of these different needs, because it meets the learners where they're at, and it really improves that accessibility that you mentioned.
Yeah, gosh, I'm so thrilled to be following some of these chat conversations that are really interesting right now. And welcome to the new Litmos customer as well, Lisa. Welcome. We're happy to have you. So in this topic, as far as content, I'm exceedingly biased because we have Litmos training content and more than 1,000 courses available. And what we just say, and you don't have to choose to use our stuff because there are tons of great providers out there, but it's just one of these things where I talk to L&D people and it's like, there's no time to reinvent the wheel. And if it's stuff that someone else has made, especially professional designers, and we've got the big studios and the people that do this for a living, there's just not time to try to do it yourself, to build it yourself from the ground up. And some of the areas that we're seeing as far as content this kind of ties back to some of the other things we were talking about, is we've seen more and more companies that are just eating up content on mindfulness, well-being, DE&I. I mean, some of these topics that 10 years ago, I don't think most companies would have even offered it. They would have just been like, that's your own personal business. We're not responsible for your mental health, or you're not, you know, your well-being. And I think it's been a beautiful evolution of the learning space that now companies are seeing this as essential, as it's our number in our number 5 category of an essential of making that content available to your employees. This is probably more specific to employees than that extended enterprise groups. But and then someone had mentioned in the chat, you know, just short in the flow of work, you know, if you're depending on the role the person is in, let's say they're a salesperson or a customer service person, and they're in the CRM system during most of their day. Well, you darn well better integrate your LMS content into the CRM or whatever, or the HR system or whatever it is, but put the content into the solutions that people are in during the bulk of their day. And that's easy enough to do from a technology standpoint. I say easy enough. It's easy if you work with us, but maybe not for everybody, but it's very doable. And that in the flow of work thing is huge, and that's not going anywhere. And it really is going back to the point of what learners want. It's almost like what learners expect. I mean, I better be able to be, if I'm a salesperson and I'm in the CRM system and I have to do a demo in 15 minutes, I need to brush up on that particular product that I'm selling. I need to be able to jump over and do a training real quick on it and be more prepared and have it front of mind. So the in the flow of work piece is huge.
Absolutely. And so this brings us to our 6th essential, and this is positive learning outcomes. So again, I'm going to put on my psychologist hat here and bring us back to the idea of motivation. So, you know, learners have a variety of goals when they engage in learning, right? This is remaining compliant, finishing a task I was stuck on, you know, developing towards a future role, you know, learning about a topic that I find really interesting, and whether or not learners really reach these goals influences whether or not they learn in the future. So we kind of have these, you know, these 6 essentials almost in a cycle where the learning outcomes that I achieve lead to my future motivation to learn. We know that motivation comes in 2 forms. We have extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. So with extrinsic, this comes when a learner has reached their goals and they say, you know, I feel rewarded by the fact that I am remaining compliant, or I learned something new, or I feel like I'm making progress towards developing for a new role. So if learners know that they can reach these outcomes and they can reach these goals by engaging in learning and accessing the learning system, then they're more likely to go in the future. But there's this other type of motivation too, which is intrinsic. And this is doing something just because you enjoy it. And this is doing something because you find it, you know, enjoyable and fun. And it's something that brings you happiness. And so when we're providing a great learner experience, when we're removing all of the friction that might happen when someone engages with learning technology, we're making sure that this is a really positive experience. When the content is fresh and engaging, and we're really making sure that learners are having a good time while they learn, they're then motivated to learn again because of this intrinsic motivation, because they know that learning in the future will be something positive and something really enjoyable. And so when we have the technology to support really great learner experiences, we're going to create this cycle of learning and then starting it all over again.
Yeah, and
yeah.
So Lauren, I'm reading stuff in the chat. I wanted to address something that I think is important, and I'd love to hear your comments on it, Lauren, too, is the comment was from Lisa. And yes, Lisa was saying, you know, think about how these things can be frustrating for us as learning leaders. Imagine just how incredibly frustrating it can be for someone who has 0 previous experience with digital learning. And, you know, Lisa, thank you for bringing that up, because we get so in our world of technology, and I'm 100% guilty of this, that we forget that some people haven't been doing digital, and it's a new thing. And you know, I apologize that we come from the perspective of just saying, oh well, of course everyone, you know, of course everyone does this stuff, and that's not necessarily the case. And I know from speaking with some of our customers that there were people that, again, when the pandemic hit in, what was it, March of 2020, or whatever that time frame was, people that had to switch an entirely in-person training program to digital, or basically have their training programs come to a halt. And they had to do it so quickly. And I mean, I saw someone else in the chat talking about, you know, that exactly. And I guess all we can say is that we sympathize with you. We are here as advisors, and you know, to help make that transition easier to digital. And then I know that again, one of the analyst firms we work with, you know, they're basically saying that if live instructor-led training is still the most popular, it's still the most popular form of training, but we will probably never go back, at least as far as the research that they're doing. They're saying that most companies are saying they'll never go back to as much live instructor-led as they were pre-pandemic. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Some of it ended up being cost savings. Some of it ended up being that their learners, again, on the what learners want topic, that their learners actually said, hey, we actually like e-learning better than having to get on a plane, or having to go to a hotel, or having to go sit in a conference room or a training room or what have you. So there's a variety of reasons why the pendulum's probably not going to swing all the way back to as much live instructor led, but it'll go back. And so it's probably just developing that mix of how do you bring digital into your programs and balance it with your ILT. So Lauren, do you have stats on that, or just
Yeah, I mean,
anecdotal?
Yeah, so separately, we've done some work on what we call deskless learners. So these are people who lack really consistent access to technology and work away from a desk. So pretty intuitive there, but these are, you know, your construction people. These are people working on the front line in retail. These are, you know, healthcare workers, and these are people who are really, you know, maybe not accessing technology as much, and because of that, they might not be as comfortable. So what we know is that when you're not accessing it as much and you're less comfortable, when you do access it, it needs to be as easy as possible. I mean, like, talk about intuitive navigation. Like, this has to be really a one-stop shop. You know, learning within other systems, getting notifications. We just need to make sure that these systems are really intuitive if we are going to be pushing digital learning and e-learning, because that way we can kind of bring, you know, those folks in with us, and we're addressing those different skill levels.
Yeah. Yep. And so I'm just looking at, so we've got this very lively chat conversation going on here, which is great. But there is also the Q&A. So we're in both. I don't think all of our audience today can see the Q&A, but everybody can see the chat. But we do have a couple of questions, Lauren, that came through the Q&A. So one of them, I think I already addressed this one. There was somebody was asking what type of technologies influence learning in the flow of work. So I already talked about CRM. Lauren, did you have any other? I know, well, HXM, we were already talking about HXM or HCM.
Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit in our research with learning leaders, and we talked about the idea of learning the flow of work, and really what would like the perfect technology look like to enable this. And the answer was always integration of learning across systems. You know, like, one learning leader mentioned, like, it would be super cool if when I Googled something, the first answer was like something in the LMS, like it was just integrated into my browser, integrated into, somewhere where I spend a lot of time, Microsoft Teams, or other collaboration channels, Slack, where I'm always, talking to other people, especially as someone who works remotely. If I am, talking about needing an answer on a topic, maybe I can, within that same system, find learning or send learning to a colleague that I know that would be helpful to them. So really, if we're learning in the flow of work, we need to be learning in the places where we work every day. And that is not always the LMS. That is a whole host of other systems where we can, with great integration, make sure that we're offering learning at that point of need.
Yeah. I hear stories about, it's like the salesperson sitting in her car in the parking lot outside of a customer's location, and it's the double thing we were talking about access and then navigation. So they're literally on either their phone or their tablet or whatever, and quickly going to find the quick module or little micro learning that they need to do on a particular product, to just have it again fresh in mind, like I was talking about before, right before they walk in to meet with a prospect or a customer, and that's so in the flow of work. It's like on the spot right there and where you need it. And in those the short convenient, like the convenience thing that someone typed into the chat, and someone typed in, intuitive technology. It's like, this is where we're going. I mean, and I know, again, it can be a little overwhelming if you're new to it. It can be a little overwhelming, but we just have to wrap our arms around it and go that direction. Because I don't think we're going back the other way.
Right.
So, and actually, Lauren, I have another question for you that's in the, and I know we've got a couple more in the Q&A, but so I was taking a note. What in the cycle, where do learners experience the biggest roadblocks or barriers? Where do you see in the surveys and the research that you do? Where are the big barriers?
Yeah, so it really depends on who the learner is, right? So we talked about, people who just might not have a high level of comfort with technology. They would really struggle with that access piece, right? Just accessing and navigating, knowing where to go and what to do. That can be particularly difficult. We also see for, maybe leaders in the organization or high potentials in the organization, based on, some of our research on learner personas, they typically struggle with the content that's available. Sometimes, it's not as personalized as they need it to be. It's not at the level that they need it to be. Maybe it's too simple or too elementary. And so it really does kind of depend on who your learners are. But I will say, we do see learners falling off at each of these points because they are that essential. They are that vital to the learner experience. It just, the extent to which that is important and those different pieces are as essential just kind of depends on who your learners are and what context they're in.
Yeah, and I'm looking at, Kelly, your chat that, understanding the user journey, understanding the differences, that's so critical. Just to give an example, one of our customers is the Girl Scouts of America, and they have mostly, well, I think the large bulk of their users to the LMS are volunteers, and so they tend to be on the older side. It's just the reality of who their volunteers are. There are people who are maybe retired and actually have time to go volunteer in a significant way for a nonprofit. And so they really had to get to know their learners and know that, like, you can't make assumptions about someone's comfort level with technology, that there needed to be a little bit of hand-holding to make people comfortable to be able to access in this case Litmos, but access the LMS and how to navigate it, where to find what you're looking for. And there did had to be that exploratory period where they were, you know, saying, you know, we need to understand our users' journey. Who are our users, and what are they comfortable with? And that's more, you know, that's going to be different from organization to organization of how you ascertain that information and how you learn to understand your learners. But it's really important, you know, if you're a tech startup and most of your people are under the age of 35, you're not going to have to do as much of that, just to be perfectly frank about it, you know, and you know, just to understand who they are and what they really do want. So and then Lauren, I'm going to answer one question in the Q&A that's specific to Litmos, and it came in as an anonymous person, but it's asking, do you integrate with the HRIS system UKG UltiPro? I am not familiar with that product, so I will need to follow up with you. If I'm going to give you my email as we wrap up here, because I think we're out of time too, but yeah, we're basically out of time, but my guess would be yes, because we do integrate with HRIS systems. And then you're also asking, do we integrate with LinkedIn Learning? And I'm pretty sure the answer to that is yes. I'm almost certain that LinkedIn Learning is a partner of ours. Do you know that, Lauren?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you could send me an email, the person who's asking that question, to Samantha.lang, Lang at sap.com, Samantha.lang at sap.com. I will get answers to your question. And thank you for asking. So, okay. Any other final, oh, thanks, Lauren, for typing that in the chat.
Yeah.
Any other final questions that anyone wants to ask? We've got about 1 minute, but I know there's been a lot of dialogue going on in the chat. I think that is it. I think we are about to wrap. So thank you so much for all of the interaction. It's always so illuminating to just hear what everybody's really dealing with in the real world. You know, we get our head in the clouds, literally, here in the cloud tech space. But it's really fabulous to hear from everybody and hear your challenges. And we are here to help. And you can see if you want to reach out at any of our social sites that are on the slide there, or just send me an email, send Lauren an email. It's just lauren.park@sap.com.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. I'm going to wrap up, Lauren.
Yeah, sounds excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. My first time at an e-learning industry webinar. I had a great time. You're a great group. And yeah, thanks again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.